This story, like all stories, is a choose your own adventure. And here at the beginning, we find you. Yes, you, with your family. And you're on your family's land, however large or small that is. However long or short you've been there, it's yours. Or at least it feels that way. It's all that you know. And you defend and protect this place and these people. You never want to leave. Until one day, you look up and notice that big blue sky. It seems endless, and this hint of infinity sparks something in your chest. A recognition of a feeling that you can't quite name. In amazement, you start following this feeling, looking up the whole time, moving as if there's an invisible string pulling you onward. Until you bump into something. It's sturdy and solid, maybe a little rough. You look and you see that it's a fence, and you realize this is the boundary of your family's property. You look down at your dusty boots and you understand that they've never gone past this point. Who knows what's on the other side? You glance back at the way you came, and home seems so far away. So you look again to the fence, and then you realize that it's full of holes, that it sags in places, and it's leaning in others. This gives you a pang of worry, of doubt. What if the fence comes down? Where did this damage come from? And why is nobody fixing it? These questions weigh heavily on you. Felt most of all in your stomach, as an uncomfortable burden. What are you going to do? Maybe you head home and you try to ignore this. Maybe you pick up some tools and you get to work. You start repairing. Either way, the call of the sky that you feel in your chest, it doesn't go away. If anything, it gets stronger. You find yourself moving between the house and the fence more often. You're restless. And each time you see the fence in its state of disrepair, its need for maintenance, that heaviness inside of your gut, it hits you a little bit harder. Until one day you decide, all right, I'm going to fix this. So you pick up your tools and you get to work. Put your head down and you go hard all the way around the perimeter, every bit of it. And then you're finally finished and you feel proud because you finished what you started. And you're sure this fence will stand for a good long while now. And as you turn to admire your work, you're shocked to see that as if you didn't do anything at all. All the work you've done is gone. There's the same holes, the same sags, they're all still there. If anything, the fence is in worse shape now. Some people, when confronted with this situation, they throw their tools to the ground. They hang their head and they go back home. They give up. Others, they might work harder, endlessly fixing their fence, going in circles, because they think if they stop, it'll collapse. Maybe you've alternated between both of these modes. Either way, you always return home. But that weight in your stomach, that fear of what happens when this fence comes down, it doesn't leave you. This silent, nagging fear, it only gets louder. And these negative emotions, they start to build like a cloud around your head, following you everywhere you go within this fenced boundary. This toxic cloud is invading your home as well. There's no escape. Until one day you decide, finally, a change needs to happen. Staying here is not going to do anything. In desperation, you find yourself back at the fence, but you're curious as well. You want to know what else there is to do. You've got questions, but you don't have the voice to use them yet. Except, this time, you're able to see over the fence, and this is something you've never been able to do before. The vision takes your breath away. That endless blue sky meets the horizon and becomes something infinite, eternal. This moment sparks a fire in your chest, igniting the piece of sky that was already there, and this adds strength to your curiosity. Some people, when gifted this moment, they might hop over the fence and run towards that horizon. Others might put it in their back pocket and walk back home, saving it for a rainy day. But at this point, the clock is ticking. The countdown has started. You, in your heart of hearts, you know you've outgrown this fence, this boundary, and it's only a matter of time until you cross that threshold. And when you do cross over, it's exciting and exhilarating. There's new energy, new experiences, new people. All of this fills you up. And for a while, you forget about the beaten down fence. It's not a concern anymore. Then, after some fun and adventure, you encounter an even bigger fence. This barrier wasn't put there by you, and there are people who are paid to repair it. There's even guards who block certain points. They don't let you pass. How dare they? Who are these people? You've already made it over one fence. Why can't you go over this one? Who put it here? Why are they reinforcing it? So many questions. So much fire and curiosity. And you know you're going over that fence, or under it. You have to see. You have to know. So you sneak. You find excursions, and you make adventure. And out there, it's like nothing you've ever felt before. There's freedom, there's love, but it's wild. And a part of you is scared to live in the beyond because you worry about getting lost in it. You're worried this wilderness will eat you up. But you're clever, so you think, I'll just take some of this back with me, and that will sustain me. It'll keep me happy. Only one problem with this plan. You soon discover that you can't hold onto this stolen fragment. It keeps falling through your fingers. So you go on more and more excursions to try and keep the fire alive. And eventually, this process starts to lose its effect as well. Now at this point, some people give up. They accept that this is how things are, and they try and make themselves content within this larger fence. While others, they intensify their excursions, trying to bring back more and more and more. But this is just another version of endlessly fixing the fence, that one of your family home. So what do? Internally, you sense you're caught at the crossroads, and in that realization, the sadness that you first felt when witnessing the shape of the original fence, it comes roaring back stronger than ever, and you feel it like two heavy river stones in the bottom of your stomach, cold and flat and immovable. And this weight feels like it might drown you. It takes you to the ground. You hit the dirt, rock bottom. You don't know how to go on. You can't go back. Then you feel it under your palms and between your toes, the soil. And you realize this is the same soil that's on the other side of the fence, that it's all connected. So you take some of it in your palm and you bring it to your chest, adding it to the sky and fire that's already there. You sit up and that fence, it's gone. You blink and the fence is back. Gone, there, neither, both. What's happening here? Then it dawns on you that you have a hand in creating this fence. But how can that be? It's way bigger than you are, way older. And yet, this realization feels true. Sometimes you can see it and sometimes you can't. Sometimes you recognize that you're making it stronger. Sometimes you're weakening it. So what are you supposed to do with this information? Remember, you're on a choose your own adventure here. You can create this fence or uncreate it. One is done unconsciously and the other with intention. You realize this fence is only an illusion of separation. It's a symbol. There's no distance or differentiation. And this fence is maintained by those who benefit from influencing you to think this is the end of the world. But you've already been across this boundary. You know there's more out there. In this moment, those heavy river stones in your gut that have been weighing you down, they begin to dissolve, and they turn into the very same flow that has been washing over them for countless years. This water inside of your body starts boiling, the process feeling like a great shifting that rises to combine with the earth and sky and fire in your chest. It's transformative. It can do anything. It's so powerful. It's so creative. You blink. Welcome back. What am I getting at with this alchemical allegory? Well, it turns out that it's biologically impossible for a person to be afraid and curious at the same time. Curiosity may have killed the cat, but it just might set a human free. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's do a quick review of a few key terms. Firstly, what are values? Not to be confused with valuables, like gemstones or Bitcoin or whatever. Values are a person's principles. They're standards of behavior, one's judgment of what is important in life. They provide direction and inspire action, which seems pretty useful in daily life. How many of you can list your top 5 values off the top of your head? Go! Not so easy, is it? So, why don't we all know what our own values are? Well, that's because as social beings within a society, we unconsciously take on the values of those around us. This process quickly becomes a feedback loop, which can then solidify into limiting beliefs, like the example of the fences in the story. This process isn't necessarily an issue, except that most of us tend to fear what we don't understand, just as we tend to believe what we see. So, if this feedback loop is only sending certain experiences our way and actively blocking others, then we're going to be accumulating fear without even realizing it. An example of this process is when I shared a cat video on Instagram. One video, and the next day my feed was flooded with cat videos. Boom, instant feedback loop. But fluffy little cats doing silly things is harmless enough. Except, what if that feedback loop involves fear-inducing content? Fear seems like one of those things that everyone knows about, but we can't quite name, can't quite put our finger on it. When actually, fear is an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, and it's likely to cause us pain or be a threat to us. Fears hold a person in place by directing them unconsciously. This is because it's difficult to overcome fears only with our mind because it's an emotion influencing the belief. Fear is so slippery because it operates on a different level than our cognitive processing, aka our waking consciousness. And so it takes a lot of practice to even notice emotions and beliefs. The core issue is when we don't fact check ourselves, because fearful emotions and beliefs may not be based on accurate information. We've got our blinders on. Yes, we may be feeling fear or anxiety, which is fear's mini-me, but this sensation, is it appropriate to the current situation? More often than not, this fearful emotion is a state actually arising from a past experience. Thankfully, our little squishy buddy, the brain, has us covered. It has to make a response regardless of the sensory information. It doesn't care if it's accurate or not. Otherwise, we'd just be constantly overwhelmed or we just die. This is commonly known as survival mode. And surviving is fine, I guess. It's just not all that fun. Imagine you're playing a card game and you're dealt 5 cards, but you can only get to see 2 of them. A this or a that, a fight or a flight. You're in the game, but at a serious disadvantage. And you're not really playing until you know what all the cards are. So, how to enhance your awareness? The way forward might actually be indicated by the fear itself. Fears come with a silver lining that they won't tell you about until you poke them a little. The simple act of a fear arising is an indicator pointing towards our values. The fear is loudly saying, no, don't, hide, stay, stop, which is a misdirection that we can use to help clarify real direction. It's like when a bird pretends to have a broken wing as it runs in front of you to lead you away from its eggs. At face value, it seems obvious what's going on, but the whole scene is a lie. True direction only has a chance if we get curious enough to look past the fear, if you trace it back to where it's coming from. Psychotherapist Miriam Greenspan says in Healing Through the Dark Emotions that almost any phobia or fear that you can name at its core is one of these 6. Fear of pain, loss, death, vulnerability, isolation, and chaos. We're not actually afraid of falling. We're afraid of impact. We're not actually afraid of the unknown. We're afraid of not being in control. Greenspan goes on to say that the raw emotion of fear itself is actually not paralyzing, but energizing. Fear moves us to act. And if we avoid it instead, the fear only grows. The trick is in knowing how to tolerate the potentially destabilizing energy of this powerful emotion. Fear is like an internal warning system that gets toxic and limiting when we keep hitting the snooze button. Fear tells us that a change is happening and we need to act. So do you want to make a conscious choice or just react on autopilot? It seems simple, but simple isn't always easy. Greenspan believes that out of the dark emotions, fear is the most shamed and condemned in our society. People will do anything to avoid feeling shamed. If you've encountered any of Brené Brown's work, then you already know that shame has the ability to completely shut a person down. In this scenario, there's no hope of getting that first fence of family dynamics, never mind the fence representing society. The way through takes courage, and the flip side of courage is vulnerability. Many of us don't want to go there because vulnerability can feel like death. This is the wild beyond, that limitless possibility where it might seem like you'll get eaten up. It's so much easier to grasp onto the crutch of fear, which is an illusion of safety. Here's where we pivot back to values, because they are what connect us to something larger than ourselves. They're the points of direction in the wild beyond, like navigators using the stars to make their way across vast oceans. And just like those ancient constellations, values convey a sense of certainty, an aspect of truth from a realm that fears can never access, because that's not their role. Fears are barricades against pain that keep us safe in the moment, but that just prolongs the distress, whereas values are tools of movement. This takes us to the word of the day, congruence. And this is when we can have our walk match our talk. And the more we're able to do this, the more we'll be able to live in our values. And that sense of not being enough, that underlying fear, this goes away. Okay, I hear you. How do we live in this magical land of congruence? Well, author Paul Levy has said, the greatest poison in the human psyche is unexpressed creativity. In his book, Undreaming Wetico, Breaking the Spell of the Nightmare Mind Virus, Levy discusses how expressing our experience creatively, as only we can, liberates the energy that is bound up in the compulsive and neurotic pattern of creating ancestral trauma, freeing the part of our soul that has been imprisoned and paralyzed. Levy has gone deep on this topic, and he provides examples of how our wounds can be thought of as semi-stable resonance patterns of vibratory energy to which we have become accustomed to as existing in a particular state, seemingly an objective way. Now, this is a lot of big words, but it means pretty much a fence or a barrier that we dare not cross, except it's internal. Because there's a sense of or else. Except it's not always clear what the or else means, but it seems bad. Levy says these wounds are ongoing events or processes held in place by how we pay attention to and interpret them. Doesn't matter if they happened yesterday or 10 years ago, it's still ongoing unless we deal with it. And this implies that awareness is the key in how we experience them. By intentionally attending to our wounds in a new and creative way, we change that resonance pattern and the way that these wounds manifest. The fence is there, it's not there. We're equally capable of strengthening or weakening it. If we consider creative expression in this light, then doing something artistic isn't only a reflection of the world, but it adds something to reality that has never been here before. Levy offers these empowering words. Through the creative act in creating something new, we are playing our part in creating a new cosmos. By consciously participating in our own evolution, our own internal transformation can't help but change the world in the process. Information and stories are great, but they're even better when we have a way to use it in our own lives, how we can turn it back on ourselves and make it personal. So think about a time in your own life when you made a change. What was different? Allow some flexibility about your identity in the story, the details about who you've been and where you're going. Play with this story a little bit to get some detachment from it. And you're able to create a story rather than be limited by the one you've adopted from somebody else. Offer yourself the option of, what if? How would it feel to have the best possible thing happen? What if you were able to take that first step? Lastly, use the story in combination with your values to write a new definition of yourself. You might just blink and see the world with new eyes. I hope this has helped awaken you to your authentic creative self.